Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you are. Welcome to today's special event, The Future of Women's Leadership. I am Takehito Kamata of Sophia University. On behalf of Sophia University, we all want to thank you everyone for joining today's special event. Before starting today's event, we want to share three important things with you. First, no audio or visual recording, please. Thank you in advance for your cooperation. And second, the simultaneous interpretation will be provided to you today. So please click the Zoom interpretation icon at the bottom of the screen and select your preferred language. Last but not least, if you have questions, please enter them to the Q&A box during the session. Please understand that since the time is limited, we will not be able to respond to all questions, but we will welcome any questions from you. Now, we want to have opening remarks by Professor Takashi Okada, who is also the Vice President for Academic Research Affairs of Sophia University and a member of Executive Board of Strategic Alliance of Catholic Universities. I'd like to welcome Vice President Okada.
Welcome to today's special event. My name is Takashi Okada, Vice President for Academic Research Affairs of Sophia University. Today's event is significant for all of us, to learn together the importance of women leadership and empowerment toward a better world. On March 1st, 2023, Sophia University President Miki visited the Catholic University of Portugal for the signing ceremony of the Memorandum of Agreement between the two universities. This visit strengthened the foundation of cooperation between the two universities. Today, we have Catholic University of Portugal Rector Gil at Sophia University in Tokyo. So this event will be meaningful for us to welcome Rector Gil and learn the significance of women's leadership and advance our wonderful partnership. Rector Gil, welcome to our Sophia University. We all look forward to today's panel discussion. Portugal has been an important nation for Japan. This year, 2023, Japan and Portugal celebrate 480 years of the relations between the two nations. Two Portuguese explorers landed on the island of Tanegashima in 1543 and became the first Europeans to set foot in Japan. The arrival of the Portuguese provided the opportunities for Japan to acquire a chain of technological, cultural, religious, and leadership developments that fundamentally and expansively influenced the history of Japan, most visibly with the early spread of Christianity by Saint Francis Xavier when he arrived in Japan in 1549. In 2017, Sophia University hosted a special lecture by the global leader, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres of Portugal, during his first visit to Japan as the Secretary General. Tonight, we are all delighted to have another global leader of Portugal, Rector Gil, here at Sophia University to learn how to promote greater involvement of women and raise awareness of the importance of women's leadership and empowerment. Now, I'm glad to have the opportunity to introduce the two panelists and the moderator. The first panelist is Professor Isabel Capeloa Gil. Dr. Gil is the sixth rector of the Catholic University of Portugal and professor of cultural studies at Catholic University of Portugal. In 2018, she was elected the first woman president of the International Federation of Catholic Universities. President Gil is also a passionate advocate of international education. She has continuously developed international research networks and utilized her strong leadership as a consultant for the Deutsche Forschungsgesellschaft and Danish Research Council and Fulbright Commission in Portugal, and others. As an advocate for women in leadership, she has been a mentor for young women entrepreneurs. Within an International Federation of Catholic Universities, she created the first task force for women leaders and has been working for the empowerment and the dignity of women worldwide. She was appointed by Pope Francis to serve in the Scientific Council of the Holy See's Higher Education Accreditation Agency. She is also a member of the Board of Trustees of the Global Federation of Competitiveness Councils. The second panelist is the Professor Miki Sugimura. Dr. Sugimura is a professor of Faculty of Human Sciences and former Vice President for Global Academic Affairs of Sophia University. She is a visiting professor of the United Nations University Institute for the Advanced Studies of Sustainability, a research fellow of Japan International Cooperation Agency Ogata Institute, a senior program officer of Research Center for Science Systems at Japan Society for Promotion Science, and a vice chair of Promotion of Sustainability and Postgraduate Education and Research. She was appointed as a member of the International Expert Group on the revision of the 1974 recommendation by UNESCO in 2022. She was also president of Japan Comparative Education Society, and she is a co-op member of Executive Board of World Council of Comparative Education Societies. President Gil and Professor Sugimura are also authors of chapters of the book More Women's Leadership for a Better World, Care as a Driver for the Common Home with the Preface of Pope Francis, published in March 2023. Professor Makiko Deguchi will be the moderator in today's panel discussion. Dr. Deguchi is a professor of Sophia University's Department of English Studies, Faculty of Foreign Studies. She is also a director at a Center of Global Education and Discovery at Sophia University, and her specialty is cultural psychology, where she studied the process of acculturation and the psychology of prejudice and discrimination of people in dominant groups. We really look forward to learning practical ideas we could extensively put to promote women's leadership with others, for a sustainable future through individual, instructional, national, international, and circular collaborations. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Gil, Professor Sugimura, and Professor Deguchi.
Thank you, Vice President Okada, for your introduction. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this panel, The Future of Women's Leadership. And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. My name is Makiko Deguchi, and I will be moderating today's panel. This panel came about because Sophia University has been awarded a grant to support women researchers in academia. As part of this grant, I myself and a team of researchers from Sophia traveled overseas to different universities to study good practices in promoting women researchers. In that process, we developed a global mentorship program where women scholars with leadership experience could serve as mentors to younger women faculty. And this is where we were very fortunate to have Rector Gil, who is here with us today, to be our very first global mentor. And she had sent us an incredibly inspirational video message and thoughtful advice for women who are considering taking on leadership positions. Today, we are here to further this dialogue between women leaders from two universities, Sophia and the Catholic University of Portugal. And so I would like to start the panel. Okay, so if I may, my first question to both of you is this. So many people say that it's important to recognize the importance of having representation of women in leadership positions in all walks of life, all domains. But we have not seen, equal representation yet in the universities. So what do you consider to be some of the barriers for women to rise into positions of leadership in universities? And what do you think are effective ways in which universities can increase the number of women faculty into decision-making positions within higher education? So it's a big question, but perhaps could we start with you, Rector Gil?
Certainly, it's for me a privilege to be here with you discussing a topic that we are also passionate about, and it is so important for the development of our universities. I want to thank Vice President Okada for his remarks and the wonderful introduction, and Professor Deguchi for managing and giving us hard questions in this session. And it is such a pleasure to be again with Professor Sugimura, whom I've met years ago on Zoom. We actually had more of a Zoom interaction than an in-person interaction. So it's truly wonderful to be on this stage with these two incredible women. Now, the first question, the hurdles, what are the barriers? As we look at the situation of the leadership of women at universities, Catholic and non-Catholic, worldwide, the situation is dire. It's not as bad as it was years ago, but it's still not enough. In the case of Catholic universities, the study that the International Federation did shows that only 8% of universities have female leaders, and that is certainly not enough. In Europe, generally it's 23%, but when you look at the number of faculty and researchers, we're talking about 47 to 50%. And so there's a lack in how that participation in the academic community then reflects in leadership. I would say that the barriers to women rising to leadership positions are mostly threefold: institutional, behavioral, and cultural. The first barrier refers to an institutional difficulty in transforming long-held assumptions and a certain prejudice against women as leaders. Either due because there is the sense that there is a certain, what we may call an emotional trap, that women as leaders are more emotional than rational, and that will in a way affect their ability to make reasoned decisions, or even also because the traditional qualities that are associated to leadership, usually in the male dimension, vision, ambition, determination, when they translate into a woman leader, they are perceived as being negative characteristics. So an ambitious woman is something that is demonized, whereas an ambitious male leader is someone who is powerful and will drive the institution forward. Okay, so there is this institutional bias at most institutions that prevent then the development of women to the higher echelons. There is also, but the problems are not only in the institution, they're also in us, women researchers. They're in our behavior, in the way we have been shaped by the context and by the culture we have been brought into. Women are traditionally more cautious, more demanding of themselves, often lacking the confidence to profile themselves for the top positions of institutions. When I talk to women who are at that stage where they can be put forward, presented for the top leadership position of their university, they're usually overcautious. I'm not sure. They need reassurance of the confidence. Am I the right person? Do I have the necessary skills? Is this something that will affect my life so negatively that maybe I don't want to take in the burden and the responsibilities? And that is something important, that's where networks and support, and it's important to also take on the role in a different manner, but be confident. If you have reached that stage, you are more than ready to move forward and take that step. And finally, there is this social, cultural barrier that is global, of course, a bias that links women to nurture, not to leadership. And that sips across all cultures. Just an example, some years ago, I think quite a long time ago, more than 10 years ago, we usually have the notion that in the Northern European countries, the issue of female leadership is much more progressive than in other places around the world. And we had a research project in the field of gender studies and psychology with Norway, looking at the conciliation between family and profession for women in academia. And the results were unexpected because it turned out that the situation in Norway was much more complicated than what we had anticipated in a Southern Catholic European country. That the barriers, more often women, once they had a family and had children, were inspired to move out of the profession and only come back 10 years after, which in academic years translates into you will not be able to reach the position. You cannot simply stop 10 years of doing research. So and there was no social support for that. I mean, there was not a structure that would allow the children, so mothers effectively had to make a choice, right? I mean, you cannot be either a mother and a top professional. And so on the one hand, you had this perspective and anticipation that in these countries where there is so much female representation that things were much more easier. That's not the case. So the cultural bias is there, and it's something that needs to be discussed, negotiated, deconstructed. But more importantly, I think we need to find spaces where the personal and the professional can be articulated and equated.
Okay, thank you. Professor Sugimura, would you like to respond as well? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Deuchi. And again, Rector Gil, welcome to Sophia University. I'm very honored to have you here finally, because we met the first time in Barcelona when we started the SACRU, Strategic Alliance, the Catholic University's meeting, and I met at that time. But since then, we met online only. Yes, so today I'm very happy to see you in person. Our Vice President, Professor Okada, already introduced the SACRU activity since then, developing a lot. Actually, I still remember Rector Gil proposed this SACRU idea with some colleagues with Italy and Spanish, the Catholic universities, and you're very kind to invite Sophia University at that time. So today, anyway, I'm very, very excited to have you here finally. Thank you very much. And for me, first of all, I'd like to appreciate Rector Gil's perspective. Now, Rector Gil proposed the three bias, the institutional and behavior and cultural, and totally agree with you. Actually, in Japan, yes, Japanese society has been described as a male-centered society so far, and women's organization, the management or leadership skills seems to be neglected so far. But nowadays, we must cooperate together a lot the societal factors, maybe the number of the population in Japanese society has been decreasing, shrinking. So sometimes the women's power are needed, but this is a very practical one. But more importantly, now Rector Gil already mentioned it, maybe women also have a kind of dream and try to aim their individual purpose or the life purpose or something. So that's why if we can realize the dream as it is, the women should be recognized as a very important actor for the societal development. And of course, the university needs the women's power, I think. I also agree with Rector Gil's mention it, because you mentioned it, if we take the leadership, maybe responsibility or burden should be a very important point to be considered. Actually, when I was a vice president of the universities, of course, we can do many things, but at the same time, we must be responsibility for many things. And I imagine how the Rector Gil has been now in charge of those kind of responsibility. I enjoyed the mentor video. Thank you very much for sending us a wonderful video and a good message and encouragement. And you mentioned it, sometimes top manager seems to be very isolated from the surrounding people. Sometimes the isolation should be very important because the leadership must be their own way. But at the same time, we need to collaborate with the surrounding people, even we in charge of the burden or responsibility. So sometimes the women, this issue may be common with a male, but sometimes the women try to avoid those kind of burden or responsibility. You mentioned it, that maybe behavioral factors should be considered. So that sense, maybe burden is societal one is more practical one, but in the women's side might a kind of the barrier to realize the good leadership. So yes, all in all, anyway, I agree with your opinion. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, so it was very helpful for Rector Gil to discuss the institutional, behavioral, and cultural barriers. So I guess my next question would be, what are the effective ways in which we can then counter these? Now we kind of identified the barriers. What could we do to sort of overcome this so that we have more women representation in academia?
I think that is absolutely now the crucial where the action plan and the call to action is. How do we counteract, right? In Europe, all universities have been inspired to create gender equality plans. So there must be, the gender equality plan is placed on the level of the presidency or the rector's office, and it represents a commitment for equal opportunity at the institution. Now, a plan is a plan. So a plan must, to my mind, have, in order to be consistent and effective and impactful, there must be three things that we need to do. The first one, we need to understand, it's to observe. This is what we do as academics, as researchers. When we have a problem, first we analyze. So we need to observe, analyze the current situation. What is it? Do we not have enough women faculty? Is it a question? And where do the barriers stand? How many do we have on the assistant professor level, on the associate professor, on the full professor? How is the career built, percentage, and how those three echelons are organized? Usually, and that's the example in most, I haven't seen a university where this is not the case. So I hope that I can be corrected in the future, because this would mean that we are moving. It's usually a pyramid where the women at the top echelons as full professors are a very, very, very small minority. Let's say at my own institution, and we have, I must say, quite relevant track records in equal opportunities and gender equality. We have 50% male, 50% female leadership team, equally 50%, 50%, 40% as on the level of deans. And so I think we have a quite a relevant track record, but still the number of full professors is about women, is about 8% of the general whole, right? So the crucial issue, I think, in when we're talking about career progression is how to move women through career pathways from assistant through associate and full. And that is not giving them a green pass. It's simply about understanding the conditions under which the career is being organized, and how the hurdles that they face can be overcome or supported. Because, of course, women, when they're in the assistant professor level, that's when they're most productive, but it's also when they raise their families. So when the children are the youngest. So it's an uneven playing field when you look at the conditions that our male colleagues have, right? And that requires something else beyond academia, which I will refer to later. So analyzing, understanding the specific situation. In Portugal, at the Catholic University, we have created an observatory of gender equality where we try to monitor the unfolding of equal opportunity. Second is to have a consistent policy strategy that must be consistent and backed by the rector's president's office, must be in the mission and of the university moving forward, so that gender equality can be observed across tenure committees. I mean, you cannot have equal opportunity if the committee that is analyzing procedures for tenure is not balanced already there, right? In the hiring committees, you need to have that balance. It doesn't need to be 50-50, 40-30. You start with what you can, but it cannot be 100% the other gender. What we usually, the terms we use in our gender equality plan is the less represented gender. Now we're talking about women, who knows in the future, so we need to have equal opportunity on both sides, right? And that is structural. Hiring committees, tenure committees, and also to include gender, not as something that is marginal, and we have here an expert in gender studies, marginal to the overall discipline, but that is part of the way the discipline is understood. So in the content we provide to students, I come from culture studies, and I used to believe as an assistant professor that it was necessary to have specific seminars on gender issues. Now I think that gender must be put in the mainstream seminars of cultural theory, where we deal, it's not something adding on to, it's part of the core of the discipline, right? So raising that awareness and content, I think, is absolutely, so it's the policy, but it's also in the academic model and in shaping content. And thirdly, and very important, and I'm very glad and think this is absolutely cutting edge what Sophia is doing with the mentoring. It's important to mentor faculty. It's crucial to mentor the women as they move through the career. Mentoring does not mean, again, giving them a green pass. It's providing confidence, boosting, understanding what are the strategies, how they must organize their career, And also in this regard, when possible, implementing a family policy that will allow for both women and men to articulate their family chores. And because this is important, it starts in the family, in the distribution of chores. Our children are our own and our husbands, partners, children as well. So we need to have this pact, let's say, in the family to make things work. And that is very important when in this important book on women's leadership, Pope Francis has been speaking tremendously about this. What the roles, the mother's role in the family to care, but also to lead. The fact that you care, you can also lead. It doesn't take away, each parent has its own role, but the chores must be articulated. If you don't have that, we can have extraordinary policies at the university, but the woman will always be overcompensating because she will have to do 100% job at home, 100% job at the university. And we have to be aware of that. That's why it's hard. And women being, as I said, super demanding with themselves, well, can't make the two things work. So we need to have joint policy at the university level and socially, the family level.
Thank you. Professor Sugimura, would you like to
Yes.
add something?
Thank you very much. Yes, I again totally agree with you. If I explain the context of Japanese universities, now the government and university are required to set the target for the number or ratio of women's faculty members and strongly encourage to increase the number of female faculty and staff. But if possible, we need to think about not only the number, but also the qualified persons should be very important when we manage the university, because on the other hand, the university now require to assure the quality of education research. So that point raised another point, how we can encourage the women's, the researchers or faculty members to be working at the university, but at the same time, we also work together with the male researchers and the faculty staff to strengthen the university's function, I think. So I also wrote some papers in this book, and at the time I cited the one UNESCO report. The UNESCO published one report on the women's in higher education in 2021, and they also proposed this idea, the number, but the access or opportunity should be very important. Not only to give the access, we should think together how we can enrich the university's education research activities together. So my perspective is maybe we need to consider the binary view, not only just the male persons ratio or women's ratio, but we need to always try to make a balance between it. So you already mentioned it, not necessarily it's more than 50% or like that, but more importantly, we try to make a good academic community and society in cooperation with men and women. So that's a very important point when we think about the future of university. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you very much. Rector Gil, you mentioned that at your university, the academic leadership position is 40% female and 60% male. That's a very, envious number, I think, from a Japanese university standpoint. What has been sort of the impact of that? Like, how do you feel? What's the sort of the sense that the changes that sort of came about when these numbers have been achieved, would you say?
Well, diversity always brings more creativity to campus, an environment that is I'm going to use the word, it is demanding but less competitive, in the sense it is very demanding, but it's not a one-on-one competition for life. Okay, so it's more cooperative, much more cooperative and collaborative. As I see, as we move to the future of science, science is not a singular endeavor. It's not a simple discipline-based siloed activity, because the large problems that humanity is faced with require cooperation. And that contribution, the contribution of female researchers and female leadership in bridging conflict, in supporting collaboration, in driving things forward, has been absolutely of the essence. In fields that range from engineering, biotechnology, where we have a very strong group of female PIs who have been making cutting edge science and are considered amongst the top 10% researchers in the world. And they have done extraordinary work, and they do it collaboratively in teams, structuring, very focused on the well-being of the team, in driving things forward jointly. Full of admiration for what my colleagues have been doing in this regard. Creative solutions, that's also one top contribution. Empathy, third. I spoke earlier about the emotional trap. Women are not emotional, unreasonable beings, but they come from a tradition of care and empathy. And they bring that into what they do professionally as well. So the quality of the human interaction has certainly moved and been transformed. And that seeps into the way the university is perceived by society at large. So it's not something just inside the walls of the university, but it translates into what is outside. Very recently, during World Youth Day in Portugal, we were fortunate enough to receive His Holiness Pope Francis on campus. And one of the initiatives that we dedicated to the Holy Father was a new chair in economics titled The Economics of Francesco. It's part of the movement of Francesco's economy, but it's not only, that's not the simple title. The title of the chair is The Economy of Francesco and Chiara, because we need to bring in the contribution of Chiara of Assisi into the whole process of care for creation, care for the common good, for the Franciscan vision of the world. Chiara is absolutely of the essence. And Pope Francis underlined that in his speech. He said, it's crucial to recognize the contribution of Chiara, because she was absolutely essential for what we now consider the Franciscan worldview. And so providing visibility, providing recognition is something that we must do. It's our task, and that impacts the community, and it impacts the way society is perceived. And I must say there's something else very important for our students. We have probably 50% women, 50% male students. It may change from one year to year. Have 51% one year, 49% the other, but it's roughly 50-50, right? And the role model that we present to our young students, they are going out to be top professionals in society, and they must be empowered to take up those positions. So they need to see that at their institution where they're being trained, that women can occupy the top positions as well. So it's something that is also structuring of the kind of society that we want to develop in the future. Dignity for men and women.
Thank you. It's a very encouraging message about with the increased number of women leadership, you see the changes, such as more creativity and more collaboration and more empathy and care. It's and role models for the students. So thank you so much for sharing that. It's very inspiring. So going on to my next question, as Rector Gil, you mentioned in your video message as a global mentor, that being at the top could be incredibly lonely. And this was also communicated by Professor Sugimura. What are some effective ways to combat such loneliness and isolation, would you say? Maybe, yeah. Would you like to start, Professor Sugimura?
Thank you very much. When I enjoyed your mentor message, more than 25 minutes, it was very impressive because you mentioned at this point, yes, yeah, and not only the university leader or the institutional leader always faces these kind of issues, I think. But you just encourage us, and the things which taught us from your video, maybe we need to, of course, fight the loneliness or the isolation. But I think maybe those who can face those kind of the isolation or and loneliness can become a leaders, I think, because the leaders always, of course, required to take the leadership, but at the same time, they also can control those kind of loneliness or the isolation, or should be. So those people who can manage those kind of loneliness or isolation and good human relationship also should be included in the good leadership. This is not only for women, but also the male leader, I think. But thank you very much for good suggestion from your mentor video. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I fully agree with what Professor Sugimura considers about, we need to have a collaboration. And the way to fight this loneliness is through networks, support networks. And is also something that women are very bad at, because we tend to rely too much. Again, it comes with the idea of demand. We're going to do it alone. We have to prove that we can do it. If we ask for support, that means, you're not that strong of a leader. And that needs to be unpacked, because everybody needs support. And support networks with women in similar positions, academia or institutions, is very important. And so the many associations that are being built worldwide are very important in this regard. For women rectors or for professionals, women professionals, they're very important, but also more close at hand within the institution. One of the interesting things when creating a mentoring program for the younger is also to consider that in that mentoring, the women at the top, the full professors, they also require some co-mentoring amongst each other, sharing some of the challenges and learning from each other. It's important. There is this, an English poet says, "No man is an island." John Donne, well, no woman is an island. So we need those networks to succeed, and also to articulate that with our family. And our basic support is the family.
Okay, thank you. I know that, as a leader, you need to keep up with the rapidly changing times, be aware of what's happening in the world, and there's research and academia. And there's so much to do, but only a certain number of hours per day. How do you work out your time management issues is a question I would like to ask. And, how do you sort of carve out time for family or rest or play and things like that? So maybe.
Well, that comes with experience. First, you have to learn to prioritize. You cannot manage a leadership position if you don't prioritize. and you need to understand what is most important, create a pipeline that is structured. Maybe there are things that, I mean, that's why you have a team. When you're a leader, you have a leadership team. And that means that some things do not necessarily need to be done by you personally. They can be taken over by one of your team members. If they're part of the team, that's because you trust them. And if you trust them, because they're attuned to the same strategy and the same mission. So prioritizing is absolutely essential. What needs to be done first? And sometimes, well, at universities, there are issues that are unplanned and that come and that you need to put them ahead of something that you had been planned to do. That happens. So you need to be able to improvise and integrate those urgencies. But that's, again, where teamwork is important. The rector, the president, the leader has the vision, the mission. He or she have a team that has specific skills to develop those needs as well. So prioritizing, delegating is essential. And then always keeping in mind, and this was something that for me was hard and that I learned through experience, that you always need time for yourself. You always need time for yourself. You need time amongst the insane schedules that you have. You must have time to go to the opera, read a book, do your yoga. You need time. If you don't have that specific space, you will not have the mental skills to move forward, or you wear yourself out. Because I think the true nature of a leader is to be able to know that there is a time for everything. There is a time to lead. There is a time to engage in conflict if you need to, because things happen. But that there is a time to pray, that there is a time for yourself, and that there is a time for your family, and that there must be a time for your time to be simply 100% sitting in your office every day. That is very hard because, well, I will tell you, I get up around 6 a.m. every morning, and I go to bed about midnight. Sometimes I come home at 9, and I try every day to take that back, to when these things happen, to compensate the next day, because otherwise you don't manage your time, but you're managed by your profession. And this is something I learned from a CEO of an international company, a multinational company. He told me, well, the thing to do is you manage time and you manage your role. You don't let your role manage you.
It seems much more difficult to actually practice, but it comes with, I think, experience. So thank you for that. Professor Sugimura, would you like to talk about?
I was very just agree with her. Actually, I cannot manage my time management well. So yes, prioritizing should be very important. But the network or team together at the institution level should be very important. So not only for myself, but also for themselves or for our membership should be very important. So if we can share the time management together, that should be very important one. Yeah. And another point is, actually when I reflect the daily life, maybe my family or the surrounding people's support also very important. So if we can use our precious time, not only for me, but also the family, might be also a very important point. This is a little far from the works, but if the family can work well and they're keeping good healthy, that also support me. But if they are not, that's a little problem. Yes. So those kind of the contents of time management should be important to me also. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, now I think we'd like to take a question from the audience. So I have a question from a teacher in a girls' Catholic high school. And the question is, our school is a Catholic school for girls, the only one in our prefecture. Recently, we have been told that the existence of an all-girls school is outdated in this era of gender equality. I would like to hear your opinion on the significance of the existence of all-girls schools. So perhaps Rector Gil?
Well, I can fully relate to that because I went to an all-girls school that changed to a co-ed when I was a pupil there. And I think there are two ways of looking at it. On the one hand, all-girls schools cater to the specific needs of young girls who have learned differently, have different, let's say, cognitive specificities. They learn faster in some things. They are more attuned to some sort of less physical developments and more cognitive, whereas boys are more energetic at a certain age and less cognitively attuned to some academic tasks. So there are different stages of development. Of course, we know that boys and girls don't develop the same way at the same time. Doesn't mean that they will not be able to be professionals to do exactly the same things, which I'm fully believe in. But their development stages are different. I mean, anyone knows this. And an all girls or an all boys school are focus on those specific needs. Having said that, there's something that they don't fulfill, which is the interaction with the other sex, the diversity. And it is important to test that ability to cooperate, to work, to learn together with the other gender. My experience, I mean, I cannot rationalize absolutely what that experience was as a young child, but I think it was extremely positive when there were two religious schools that were brought, two Catholic schools that were brought together, boys and girls. And it was hard at first because at one stage you think, oh, here come the boys. They're rude, they're brutes, they just, they trash everything. But on the other hand, it was also some curiosity. Yeah, we want to engage and work together. And it was, I think it was extremely important to have diversity in the way young children are educated as they grow up. So co-ed schools, I would favor that. Co-ed, international, multicultural, all of that is very important to educate a child.
Thank you. Professor Sugimura, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you very much. If I add another experiences from I also joined the Women's University when I was undergraduate. Secondary schools, I went to the co-ed schools, but when I entered the Women's University, its atmosphere changed a lot. But finally, I found maybe women's or girls' school, the students cannot help being independent anyway. So the students, all the female students, can do everything, should do everything, but we can responsible for many things, and we have a very good opportunity to be active more. So that's maybe women's girls' schools, very interesting point. And another good example of the higher education institute in the world. Now, maybe Portuguese or in Japan, we have several the women's college or university, but I saw the one very interesting case studies of ASEAN Women's College, which was established in the Bangladesh, and they supported the ASEAN women's, the young generations, the education opportunities. And this university is a very kind of international university, but they focus on the women's empowerment, and they support the young women students from developing countries. So why the women's college? because women must be encouraged by giving the good opportunity, especially the science and the technology STEM education. So those very specific, the education opportunity should be very important. So in that sense, maybe even in Japan, in the Catholic girls' school, have a very special mission based on the Christianity, I think. So thank you very much for a good question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think we have time for maybe one more question from the audience, which is in Japan, the role of taking care of the family and child raising tend to be, strongly tied to women's labor. And what is that like in Portugal? And has the men, have been changing in terms of, how they think about their role in the family?
Well, Portugal, as a Southern European Catholic country, has the very similar situation. So basically, we are brought up into a culture where it's mostly the women's job to look after the family, to look after the elderly parents, which is extremely important, and that is a pressing issue in Europe, where there's a big aging issue. And it's something that is very close to my heart, because I think it is our duty as children to look after and take care of our elders. It is no longer, unfortunately, a common something that is consensual in our societies, in Western societies, in Europe, certainly not. It's something that I worry about tremendously. But having said that, it is changing. It is changing with my generation and generation after. The awareness that family chores must be shared. And I see that in my children's generation, the generation in their 20s and 30s, that the way that the fathers relate to their children, and the way that the distribution of family chores is occurring is changing. So that we are facing a moment of transformation in that regard. And it's not simply out of a sense of demand from the women that they don't want to do this job. No, it doesn't come from a sort of activist drive by the women. It comes from a demand of the men to want to be more involved in child rearing, being close to the children. So it's in the sense of what it means, the social role of the mother and the father. I must say that as a mother, I was. I always wanted to do everything myself. I felt I was responsible for the world, and that doesn't need to be the case, because our partners, they want to be involved. They want to be part of the conversation. They're not, the idea of the absent father and the present mother no longer holds for the society, and we must be aware of this. So things are certainly changing out of a demand of the young men themselves and the young women.
Okay, thank you. So I think we are drawing to a close. And so I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to Rector Gil and also Professor Sugimura for having them share such extremely valuable insights into this importance of women in leadership in academia. So I hope that we could, we learned a lot of things today, and I hope that we can carry forward this momentum and inspiration, and to continue to further collaborate and learn from each other. I think this was a very productive, dialogue that we have had today, and I know that we have still a lot of work to do, but I think we were able to sort of get a sense of a positive vision. When there is more women in the higher levels of academia, right? There's a lot of changes, positive changes. And so that was extremely encouraging and inspiring. So thank you very much. So now thank you all for coming. And this is the end of the panel. So I would like to return to you, Professor Kamada.
Well, thank you so much. We hope everyone enjoyed this special conversation today as much as we have hosted this wonderful intellectual engagement. After the webinar, we'd like to invite you to the short survey. So please join the survey and share your feedback with us. Also, we want to thank you for the staff members and also interpreters to support our event today. We are sure this event will help us all to advance women's leadership and then also empowerment with others for others, wherever we are, wherever you are. Thank you. Obrigado. Gracias. Grazie. Gratias. TV. ありがとうございました for joining us. Be well, stay safe, and see you soon next time.